Barcelona and Real Madrid. The most famous portrayal in Spanish football arrived in the shape of a pig's head. Luis Figo had been one of Barcelona's most beloved players, a man who had sworn his loyalty to the club, and then, in the summer of 2000, he joined their greatest enemy, Real Madrid, for a world record fee. When he returned to the Camp Nou 2 years later to take a corner, the terraces emptied their fury onto him. Coins, a whiskey bottle, and then, rolling across the grass beside him, the severed head of a suckling pig. The match had to be stopped. One player walking back into a city that now considered him a traitor. That is this rivalry in a single image. But the wound is far older than Figo. Barcelona became the club of Catalonia, a region that has always seen itself as separate from the Spanish capital. Real Madrid became tied to that centre, to established power. It's often said Madrid was simply Franco's team. The truth is messier, but the symbolism stuck to both clubs regardless. Barcelona's motto, Més que un club, more than a club, was never only branding. It meant that supporting Barca could stand for an identity larger than football. The first Clásico was played back in 1902, and the hatred only deepened. In 1953, both clubs signed the same player, Alfredo Di Stefano. The Spanish Federation ruled they should share him on alternate seasons. Barcelona walked away in disgust, and Di Stefano went to Madrid and became the greatest player of his age. Decades later came Guardiola against Mourinho, Messi against Ronaldo, and a 5-0 humiliation of Madrid at the Camp Nou. Neither club simply wants to win. Each wants its idea of football, and of Spain itself, proven superior. And they do it all again this season. On the 25th of October, Jose Mourinho, the man who was in the Madrid dugout for that 5-0, walks back into the Camp Nou for the first Clásico of the new campaign. Figo's pig's head was only the ugliest proof that here, changing shirts can feel like changing sides in something far bigger than a match. Liverpool and Manchester United. Manchester United's greatest manager did not arrive promising to win trophies. He arrived wanting to destroy Liverpool. When Alex Ferguson took over at Old Trafford in 1986, Liverpool were the kings of England, champions of the country that very year, a decade of dominance behind them, and United had not been champions in nearly 20 years. Ferguson made his mission brutally clear. His greatest challenge, he later said, was knocking Liverpool right off their perch. And he did it. United overhauled them, won title after title, and left Liverpool to spend 30 years trying to reclaim a throne that had once been theirs. The strange part is that these two aren't even neighbours. They are two cities 35 miles apart who resented each other long before the football mattered. In the 1800s, Liverpool was the great port, and almost everything the North imported passed through its docks. Then, in 1894, Manchester's merchants finished building a ship canal that let cargo bypass Liverpool entirely and sail straight into the city. The money moved, and the resentment followed, and the clubs simply inherited it. The bitterness runs so deep that no player has transferred directly between them since Phil Chisnell in 1964. When Michael Owen, once a Liverpool hero, later joined United and won a league title there, Liverpool supporters treated him as a traitor. And every Red still pictures Steven Gerrard sprinting to kiss the pitchside camera after they thrashed United 4-1 at Old Trafford. They don't just count their own trophies, they count the other clubs. And every time one side pulls ahead, the other feels smaller.
Flamengo and Vasco da Gama.
In Rio de Janeiro, one derby grew so enormous they simply named it after money. The Clásico dos Milhões, the Derby of Millions. And the very first official meeting, back in 1923, already carried a message. Vasco da Gama beat Flamengo 3-1, and that Vasco side would soon change Brazilian football forever. Founded by Portuguese immigrants, Vasco had done what the elite clubs of Rio refused to do. They won the city championship with a team built largely of black, mixed-race and working-class players, men the establishment considered unfit to share a pitch. The following year, those elite clubs formed a new league and told Vasco they could join only if they dropped that group of players. Vasco's president wrote back and refused. That letter is remembered as the Resposta Histórica, the historic response, and it stands as a milestone in the fight against racism in Brazilian sport. That is the root of it. Flamengo grew into the club with the largest following in the entire country, the People's Club by sheer scale. Vasco holds something different and just as fierce: the memory of standing up for the excluded when nobody else would. Both, in their own way, believe they carry the more authentic claim to Rio. Even a hometown god could not escape the divide. Romario, a favela kid who became one of the greatest goal scorers who ever lived, wore both shirts across his career, adored everywhere and yet fully trusted by neither camp the moment he pulled on the other's colours. They share a city, a stadium, and some of the same legends. The one thing they have never agreed to share is Rio itself. Arsenal and Tottenham. Sol Campbell was Tottenham's captain, their own academy product, a man who had hinted he would never cross the line. Then he crossed it. In the summer of 2001, with his contract expired, Campbell left Tottenham in the worst way imaginable. He joined Arsenal, their most hated rivals, on a free transfer. To Spurs supporters, he became Judas overnight, and he still hears about it decades later. But here is the detail that turned betrayal into torture. 3 years on, Campbell was part of the Arsenal Invincibles, and in April 2004 they clinched the Premier League title, still unbeaten, on Tottenham's own ground at White Hart Lane. He left them, then he came back and won it all. And Tottenham already believed Arsenal had stolen from them long before Campbell was born. Arsenal moved north into Tottenham's corner of London in 1913, planting themselves on what Spurs regarded as their territory. Then, in 1919, when the top division was expanded, Arsenal were voted in despite finishing only 6th in the second tier, while Tottenham, who had finished bottom of the first, were sent down. That vote was never fully explained, and Spurs have felt cheated of the place ever since. What makes it sharper is that the two sides don't even hate each other the same way. For long stretches, Arsenal were successful enough to treat Tottenham as an irritation rather than a threat, and nothing stings a rival like being dismissed. Tottenham hated Arsenal for taking their territory. Then their own captain crossed the line too, and lifted the title on the ground he walked away from.
Club America and Chivas.
They have met more than 200 times, but only once has the title itself been on the line, and it tells you everything. In 1984, for the only time in their history, America and Chivas faced off in a championship final. America won it, lifting the trophy despite spending most of the second leg down to 10 men. Of course they did. That is Club America in a single image. The club that finds a way to win and could not care less how much you hate them for it. Because being hated is the whole idea. America are Mexico City's club, bankrolled for decades by the television giant Televisa, always ready to buy the finest foreign talent and the most decorated side in the country, and they wear the loathing like a medal. Their unofficial motto is Odiame más, hate me more. No one embodied it better than Cuauhtémoc Blanco, a street kid from the rough Tepito barrio of the capital who became the club's swaggering, infuriating icon. An outrageous trick move all his own, a needle for every opponent, goals for fun, while half of Mexico screamed at their televisions. Chivas are his opposite in every way. Guadalajara's team built on one unbreakable rule: only Mexican players, ever. The self-proclaimed most Mexican club of all. The people's side, set against America's money and glamour. That clash is why the Clásico Nacional, first played in 1943, is routinely the wildest match in the country, boiling over into pitched brawls and mass sendings off more than once. And the two carry opposite burdens. America's arrogance is a weapon, and they turn being hated into fuel. Chivas's purity is a weight, a whole nation's pride riding on them every time they walk out. Chivas want Mexico to love them. America seem perfectly content being everything Mexico loves to hate. Inter Milan and Juventus. They call it the Derby d'Italia, the Derby of Italy, and that name is the first clue. This is not a city derby like Milan against Inter or Juventus against Torino. The great sports writer Gianni Brera coined the term in 1967 for a fixture so big that the whole country splits in two over it. And the moment that truly poisoned it was not a match at all. It happened in courtrooms and league tables. In 2006, Italian football was torn apart by a scandal known as Calciopoli, an investigation into the manipulation of referee appointments. Juventus were punished hardest of all, stripped of 2 league titles and relegated to the second division for the first time in their history. The championship they had just won was taken from them and handed instead to Inter, who had finished third. To Inter it was justice, to Juventus it was theft, a cardboard title, decided in an office rather than on the pitch, and they have contested it ever since. But the wound was open long before that. On a decisive afternoon in April 1998, with Inter 1 point behind Juventus in the title race, Inter's Ronaldo was sent tumbling in the Juventus box by defender Mark Giuliano, and the referee waved play on. Seconds later, he gave Juventus a penalty at the other end. Juventus won, took the title, and the non-decision was argued over all the way to the Italian parliament. To this day, nobody agrees on it. Then came the twist. After Juventus were banished, Inter became the dominant force in Italy and swept the treble in 2010, before Juventus returned to build a dynasty of their own. Each club lived through the other's golden age during its own darkest years. Most rivals argue over who was better. Inter and Juventus still argue over whether the other side's greatest victories should count at all.
Liverpool and Everton. For most of its life, this was known as the Friendly Derby, the one great English fixture where families split down the middle, where red and blue sat side by side on the same terrace. It is now the most red-carded match in Premier League history. The two clubs were born from the same body. Everton came first. A bitter boardroom split in the 1890s drove the club out of its own ground, and the man left holding the empty stadium simply started a new team to fill it: Liverpool. They have sat barely a mile apart across Stanley Park ever since, two halves of one city, which is exactly why it stayed friendly for so long. You cannot truly hate the other lot when your brother, your father, your workmate wears their shirt. But from the 1980s, as Liverpool grew into one of the finest sides in Europe, the goodwill began to curdle, and the tackles and the sendings off piled up. Beneath it sits a real and lasting grievance. Everton were champions of England in 1985, one of the best teams on the continent, and they were denied their shot at the European Cup by a 5-year ban on English clubs, a ban triggered by the Heysel disaster at a Liverpool match in which 39 people lost their lives. Everton paid a heavy price for something that happened at their neighbour's door, and many Blues have never fully forgiven it. They came from the same split, share the same city, and once shared the same terrace. The one thing they cannot share is who Merseyside truly belongs to. Ajax and Feyenoord. Some rivalries end in a bad result. This one, once, ended in a death. On the 23rd of March 1997, two groups of hooligans, one following Ajax, one following Feyenoord, arranged to meet in a field near the town of Beverwijk, on a day their teams were not even playing each other. The fight lasted only minutes, but when it was over, an Ajax supporter, Carlo Picconi, had been killed. The hatred had escaped the stadium entirely, and to this day, away fans are banned from the fixture. Beneath the violence sits a simpler story about two cities. Ajax are Amsterdam, the capital, cultured, confident, admired around the world for a beautiful style of football. Feyenoord are Rotterdam, a hard-working port city with a harder self-image, tired of being cast as the rougher, lesser neighbour. And the man who embodies the whole feud is the most famous Dutchman ever to play the game. In 1983, Ajax decided their 36-year-old legend Johan Cruyff was finished and refused him a new contract. A furious Cruyff signed for Feyenoord. Even after Ajax thrashed his new side 8-2, he had the last word. Feyenoord won the league and cup double that season, his final one as a player, their only title in almost 20 years, delivered by Ajax's own greatest son. Ajax gave the Netherlands its most famous football philosophy. Feyenoord gave Ajax the one insult they could never answer, winning with the man Amsterdam threw away. Marseille and PSG. France's fiercest rivalry can turn ugly in seconds. In September 2020, Le Classique produced a stoppage-time brawl and 5 red cards, one of them for PSG's Neymar, who left the pitch accusing a Marseille defender of racially abusing him, an allegation the defender denied and which was never proven. That is the modern face of it, two clubs who barely need a reason. But this rivalry is younger than most, and it was built on a genuine divide. Marseille were already France's great southern club, working class, passionate, proud. Then PSG became the project of the capital, and after a Qatari takeover in 2011, a machine of almost unlimited money that swallowed the French league whole. For 30 years, though, Marseille held the one thing all that money could not buy. Back on the 26th of May 1993, a Basile Boli header beat AC Milan in Munich and made Marseille the first French club ever crowned champions of Europe. They turned it into an eternal taunt aimed straight at Paris. À jamais les premiers, forever the first. And then Paris took it. In 2025, in Munich of all places, PSG were finally crowned kings of Europe. And in 2026, they did it again, back to back. The one trophy Marseille had always held over them now sits in Paris, twice over. Yet Marseille can still say they were first. First when PSG were nobody. Paris made sure they would not be the last, and that is the wound that keeps this one alive.
Every one of these began with something taken. A stolen player, stolen land, stolen titles, or an entire city arguing over who it belonged to. The players leave, the results fade, the hatred stays. So which two clubs truly hate each other the most? And which rivalry did we miss?